Hi people, it's Archivist here, and I literally just got done playing The Last of Us Part 2. And it was pretty amazing, to be honest with you guys. The graphics, absolutely out of this world. Gameplay, surprisingly good. And the story, well, you know what? There were some bits in there that were genuinely quite heart-wrenching. But on the whole, coming to the actual end, I think the message, and the message being the importance of stopping the hate cycle, is incredibly powerful, and I'm so glad I actually played through this game. It's one of those things where it's like, I'm glad as a life experience I played The Last of Us Part 2. It's not a game that's particularly happy, to put it lightly. In fact, it's a very dark game, and I would advise anyone looking at playing this game who I suppose is struggling at the moment because the world is in a slightly, shall we say, precarious spot anyway. This game will do nothing to cheer you up. But I think for those looking for something that will challenge them, I guess their emotional flexibility, shall we say, this is definitely a good one to try. And I would like to talk about spoilers in this video because I feel like if I don't, then the vagaries of the discussion will mean I can't really touch on anything. So I will say from this point right here, there will be spoilers. Big spoilers. And if you don't want to have the game spoiled, and really, to be honest, this game is one that's very good to go into blind like I was, just stop watching now and maybe come back if you'd like to hear my opinion on how the game went and how it ended. And to talk about it, I'd like to focus on what I thought were the major points in it and just give my reaction, my thoughts to them. And the big one is, definitely the start where Joel is killed. And he's not just killed, he doesn't just die, he dies in a brutal way that at that point in time feels horrific. And the perpetrator, Abby, who we're only just introduced to, seems like the greatest monster on the earth. Like, when Ellie's pinned down and has to watch Joel be brutally killed in front of her, not only do you feel Ellie's pain because you can see it on her face, you can see that she's suffering. No, you feel that pain because you want revenge on Abby. We like Joel from the original game. Yes, he's a flawed character. Of course, he's done some terrible things. But in terms of his relatability, I think he's quite strong. He's someone who would sometimes do the wrong thing for the right reasons. So when you see him die like that, the motivation is beyond powerful. In fact, I've never had a motivation inside of a video game that strong before from a narrative perspective. It was daring, I'll give him that, considering, that Joel is quite a well-liked character, I think it's fair to say. So to have him die like that, but it was with a purpose, and I think that's what's important. It was with the purpose of giving Ellie that motivation to hunt Abby down, travel across the country, go to Seattle, and basically exact revenge. And on her path on doing that, it's not just the effort involved, but also she has to lose a bit of herself as she goes after this faction where she's killing these people. And as you kill them, there's an interesting touch in this game where as you dispatch what would normally be considered like typical video game goons, they're all given like names, and even like the dogs have names when you shoot them and their bodies are discovered. The NPCs react in a very human way, and you're like, okay, I don't think I'm doing the right thing here, but I'll keep going. Because of course, like Ellie, you're pushed forward by a desire for revenge. And you keep going, and then many things happen. If I tried to discuss them all, I'd be here forever. But going to the next most critical point, you eventually find Abby when she essentially comes to you. She breaks in, she shoots one of the very important side characters that Ellie has a relationship with, and she's got Tommy on the floor. And at that point, God, you despise Abby. Not only has she killed Joel, but now she is an immediate threat, and you see her, and she is the picture of hatred at this point in terms of the gamer's perspective. You just want to torture her. To be quite frank, at this point, you despise her. And then the game does the craziest thing I've ever seen. It actually takes you into playing as Abby, but it shows you why she had the motivation to kill Joel. And we knew it had to be something quite bad for her to do that, where essentially we find out that her father was the doctor who was looking into the cure to solve the virus. But then Joel killed the doctor to save Ellie because Ellie would have had to been sacrificed. So we immediately at least have a reason. There's at least a reason that she would do that. And, at this point in the game, we don't really know Abby, so I can't have a huge emotional reaction to that. But just conceptually speaking, if nothing else, her father clearly had a bond with her. And I think it's fair to say, if our father was killed by someone, we'd want revenge on them in the most brutal way possible too. So we know why that is. And then we continue, and this genuinely shocked me to play as Abby for a very long time. And she goes through her own story, and this is after, as you know, the killing of Joel, where it goes parallel to the hunt for her. So Ellie's hunting her, and she's playing, sort of doing her own stuff. And her story is primarily focused around the conflict with the cult, where there's essentially this group of, I guess, druids who are adverse to technology, who've been attacking her faction. And although initially it's like they are irredeemably bad, you find out that they're not all evil. Some of them definitely are, but not all of them. And you find this pair, I think they are technically brother and sister, but what I understood was that they were both girls, but the one of them identified as a guy, and that was sort of part of like their the endearment there. And you go through with them, you save them, and the thing is, Abby doesn't have to save them. That's sort of a very important part in this, is that Abby, when these two are in peril, she's already saved. Like, she has no immediate reason to save them, no real connection other than just that first interaction, but she goes and saves them anyway. And we can draw the conclusion, therefore, that Abby is actually not a bad person at all. She's just someone who was clearly, as you also see through some of the narrative, she was obsessed with revenge. Like, she spent years building herself up, which also explains why she's very, very built up. Like, it's the first thing, I can't deny it. It's the first thing I thought of when I saw her. I was like, she's very muscly for a girl. Everyone will think that, we can pretend that's normal, but she was very built up for a girl. But it's justified because she was obsessed with revenge. There was this massive gym in their complex, and she spent that time building herself up. And yeah, she's very, she has got a lot of good to her as well. And she just was motivated I guess she was just revenge for her father. Again, I suppose that is technically sympathetic. I suppose what makes it tricky, though, in comparison to Ellie, is with Joel, we knew Joel, and I think a lot of players are very morally invested in Joel. Her father, although conceptually it's just as awful, but we didn't really know Abby's father, and we didn't know Abby until this game. So I'll be honest, the whole time through, although I could start to see Abby's point of view, while she simultaneously sees the point of the cult, which is kind of interesting because she sees there are some good people in there. I have to admit, the whole way through, I was like, if I go back to Ellie, I'd like to take Abby out still, just because of that moral, that connection to her. And then there's a bit that was tricky to do, where you're Abby and you kind of catch up to the experience where it's Ellie versus Abby, and it's like a real conflict because you're like, okay, I'm playing as Abby. The mission is to defeat Ellie, but I don't want to defeat Ellie because I like Ellie. So it's a real tricky one. But I was like, well, obviously I want to see this game through, so okay, I'll try and defeat Ellie. But I was so relieved when Abby didn't kill Ellie. Where I think Abby had a moment of realizing the parallels in their two lives, like it was the same, and she decided, okay, I never want to see you again, but I'm not going to kill you and your, I guess, lover. So she moves on. And I thought that was going to be the end of the game, and the message would be to stop the cycle of hatred, which it did end up being, but I'm glad it did go on a bit longer, because then we sort of cut forward and Ellie has established this life for herself with Dina, who's been in the story up until this point. And on the surface, they have a picturesque life. They're on a farm that they wanted to be on. They have a child they're looking after. So they've got basically a family, like kind of a real nice looking home. So everything seems to be okay for a bit. But then you realise that Ellie is absolutely still tormented by Joel's death. And when she gets that torment, you realise, you're kind of reminded, yeah, of course she would be. It was so horrific. It was so brutal the way that Joel went. So I was kind of interested by that. They showed that Ellie did try to let it go, but she just couldn't. She was being kept up at night. It wasn't just a matter of impulse. It was just there in her existence, which is very curious. And then you go back to controlling Ellie, and you go to hunt down Abby. But Abby, obviously, she ends up in her own situation where she's captured by this group of people, and she's it's not said too much what happens to her. I assume she's tortured, but ultimately she's kept prisoner, and she's you find her as Ellie strapped to this post, and she's tied up so she can't move. And she's been held there for what must be a very long time, because you can see that whereas she was very bulked up before, she's now very, very skinny, where assuming she's just malnourished. And Ellie sees her, and it's just the you can only imagine the thoughts in this moment where Ellie's like, I've come here to kill you, this is why I'm here, and yet I sort of am acting like your rescuer. And indeed everyone who's told you about Abby on this part of the game has thought, oh, you're here to save Abby, aren't you? But you're not, you're there to kill her. And then initially Ellie's like, okay, I'm going to let her down. Which was interesting at first. So she sympathises with her a little bit. I suppose what goes through her head is, and what went through my mind was like, okay, Abby has clearly suffered a lot, like a hell of a lot, when Ellie finds her. So torturing her is almost like pointless, because she's already been through so much. So why exact more? Like, she seems so exhausted that maybe she wouldn't even feel it. So they're going off to the beach, and they've got two boats. And Abby goes onto one, Ellie goes onto another initially, and she's like, okay, let's just let it go. But then she's like, no, I can't. She killed Joel, and we all remember the start of the game. There's even a little flashback to make sure you do remember. You're like, no, we can't let Abby go. We can't let Abby go. So Ellie starts, she sort of provokes Abby to attack because she wants to have a fight with her, because she's like, well, you've killed basically my dad, more or less. So they start having a fight. Ellie wins handily, mostly because I'm assuming Abby's just so exhausted by this point. Though Ellie has her own wounds, so they're both hindered in some way. But Ellie overpowers and wins. And I have to admit, as I guess if you want to call it Team Ellie, I was Team Ellie. So I'm glad that Ellie sort of won in the end. She overpowered her. But in that final moment, she sees like a sort of a flash of Joel, and he's sort of smiling. And it's like to say, you've done enough, Ellie. You've done enough. You've got revenge. You've gone through absolute hell for me. You can stop now. And Ellie sort of pulls back. She lets Abby live. She's still in great emotional turmoil because it's a decision that's not an easy one. And I suppose a lot of us, even playing the game, we think back to that horrific start and we think, no, we can't forgive her, you know. And I'm sure, and this is an interesting one, like I'd love to have some discussion with people about whether, you know, should Ellie have spared it, or should she have finished her off? I think I'm glad she didn't, because then the message becomes, you know, you should stop the hate cycle, no matter how hard it may seem, because ultimately, as we have seen throughout the entire game, all hate does is lead to innocent lives being lost. So I'm glad they did it, but I can totally see why some people would want Ellie to have basically finished Abby off, to be quite frank. I'll be interesting to know if anyone wanted Abby to win that fight. I personally, I guess, again, I'm Team Ellie, but no reason you couldn't be on that side. And that was it, essentially. There was a little bit at the end where she's sort of in the farmhouse, but in terms of importance, I thought that was the most critical scene of the entire game, because that decision Ellie had to spare her, there was so much weight to it, it took every cutscene, every dialogue interaction, every perspective for me to understand that. If I'd have just seen that out of context, I don't know if I'd have got it, but just everything together. I mean, it was just incredible, the emotional complexity of it all. So yeah, I was a big fan of this game. Really enjoyed it. I think it's a game that even if you didn't want to buy it, you could really just enjoy watching the whole story. But again, I've given you a bit of a synopsis there, but it's a game that you need to experience to fully understand, because it's all in the detail with this one. The motivations, the connections, the relationships, it's all in the detail. So yeah, that's my thought. I think Last of Us Part 2, it may well be a modern masterpiece, may well be a masterpiece of a game, and such a great way to, I guess, send off the PS4. Not that it's going anywhere, the PS5 is coming, but PS4 will be here for a while. Plus, we've got Ghost of Tsushima, but you know what I mean. We're in the final year of it being the most recent one. So, if you have any thoughts on this game, hopefully you've played it and you haven't just listened to me talk about it. Otherwise, I'm sorry, but if you've got any of your own thoughts, do let me know. I think this is a great game just to have a general discussion around. I think it's something that people will remember for years to come. As always, people, thanks very much for watching and see you next time.